Hey everyone, welcome back to the Invincible Innovation Live Show. I am your host, Mazor, Kario, product design and AI expert. And in this episode today, we have a special guest that will share his valuable insight on AI in medical and health products. We will discuss the future of healthcare with AI, challenges with medical AI, and more. Stay tuned for an informative and engaging conversation. And hi, Roy. How are you?
Hi, Adi. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So happy that you're here. Roee Shibolet is the head of Israel R&D Center at Intuitive. We're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and you're so invited to join the discussion and ask questions, and we would love to hear what you think. And now we can start. So, do you think that AI will change the way we do healthcare today?
So I'm sure it will. I'm sure. But I think we really need to set our expectations and understand that the healthcare AI revolution has a very different pace from other areas. I don't think we should expect anything to change drastically, not in a year or two, or maybe even five.
Mhm.
And this might sound surprising, but I think that if we'll kind of dive into the challenges that we have when we develop AI in healthcare, then we'll very quickly understand why it's so.
Yeah, I know that when I work with startups in the healthcare and medical um, industry, they take so much longer than other startups.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
there are so many barriers and challenges and regulations they need to just handle all at once.
that's right. And I'll
And
try to kind of explain because first you have the basics, which are relevant for any medical device development, whether it has software or it doesn't, which is first and foremost the regulation. So when you want to develop any tool that has a potential to impact the medical condition of a patient or pose risk to a patient, then there's a very different level of standards that you're required to adhere to and you're required by law. It's not recommendation. And in order to get to those level of standards, you also have to have the skill sets in your company. So you have to build a compliant uh, quality system, and you have to have people that are experts in regulatory and quality and risk management, and all of that leads to a higher cost and longer time to market. Okay, and then even the regulatory submissions themselves, it's not just a one time and that's it. Let's say you've cleared the FDA, you've done all the work, which is great. But what about Europe? What about Japan, China, Canada? All of those have different regulatory bodies and different requirements which you have to submit separately. Um, and this is only the basics, right? This is for any medical
you just start
device,
with that, and then
any
you have
software.
more than that.
It's not specific to AI, but when you get into developing machine learning products, then there's a whole new set of aspects you have to take into consideration. And the FDA has already put out some guidelines to those. So at the beginning, the FDA didn't exactly know how to handle this, and they handle it very similar to any other software development. But then they kind of put out these guidelines that you need to take into consideration. And since AI development is all based on data, and we know that the more data you have to train your models, then you'll be able to handle a wider range of input and they'll be more accurate. But medical data is very difficult to collect. It's not readily
Right.
available. It's considered private information. It's held in medical institutions. And these institutions in the past, they didn't prepare for this data to be ready available for research. Okay, that's not something that they built their systems to do.
Yeah, on
And
the
so some,
on the other way around, they build the system in order not to go outside,
yeah,
to
they
stay within
protected it.
the hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're not even organized. Sometimes they're just dumped in kind of long term archives. And it's very hard to mine the right data out of that. And some of the data wasn't even collected, like video. Video didn't have any clinical use, so it was not even collected, even if there was an option to do so. So all of that makes the medical data very expensive. Okay, it's usually offered at a price from the institutions, and on top of that, you need to annotate it by medical experts. It's not just your any annotator, and all of that really puts a high cost on the data itself. Okay, so do you know like how many images was DAL-E trained on? Okay,
No, I know how many.
about 400 million images. Now, what if I
But
told
that's
you that?
like any kind of image. It's not only for a specific topic. It's like
Right,
whatever you
because it's
have on
very
the internet.
generalized, but that's the
Yeah.
level of information and data sets that it has. Now, what if I would tell you that a medical image costs around $1,
Wow.
which is a very
That's a
low
lot.
estimate after you buy it and annotate it and curate it and everything.
But
Now,
don't they come
make it math.
annotated? Like they had an expert review it within the hospital and give a diagnosis or
Now,
something.
sometimes you have some general outcome or something to connect it with, but let's say you have to now mark the exact location of a tumor. That will
Mm.
never be there on the imagery.
Mm.
You always have to do some annotation. So, just to give you the perspective of the cost, and and that's just to get your data. And then you also have to have your AI model generalized to the population. Okay, not just for it to be successful commercially, but required by the regulation because it has to be effective on the population, and not on and that population has to can have different confounders. Like you have to cover all the different disease conditions, different device manufacturers if you're doing imaging, gender, age, ethnicity, region, everything. Now start
Wow.
multiplying that. You get very high requirements for your data sets. Your training sets have to be that way. Your test sets, everything has to have that kind of
Yeah.
generalization,
Yeah.
and that's more and more cost, more and more time. Otherwise, you'll end up having a product that's cleared for males over 25 in Europe.
Yeah.
Down goes the value.
And more than that, I think that when you go to a medical institution, you get only the people who came to that institution. What about the general population who never goes there? If something is like everything's fine, I'm not going there. I'm not taking any like imaging of any sense.
Yeah,
So you don't get
exactly.
that.
So that's just kind of to give a taste. There are more, but you can understand why it takes so much time and sometimes even reaches a barrier and doesn't even cross it.
Yeah, and I know that many of great ideas and great treatments did not get to the finish line because of and not only in AI because of all of these barriers which are very hard to handle, and it's very challenging. And what you mentioned about like the bias, that the fact that we have like only part of the population getting these imaging. I think especially in places like the US where it costs a lot of money for a person to go through all these procedures, you get only a specific part of the population getting the information from them, which is very hard
Yeah.
for sure. So, what are some of the most promising AI applications in healthcare today?
Okay. So I think there's a really wide variety, a wide range of different areas where AI is being developed for healthcare. And I think in order to understand where the promise is, you really need to look at where are the pain points, right, or the needs of the healthcare systems. And I think those can kind of be categorized into only a few categories, um, which are patient outcomes, which probably is the first, which you always want to improve, um, and then efficiency, because these systems are not always efficient, and we'll see how that impacts costs. And the problem that became even much more harder during COVID, which is shortage of staff and specifically expert staff. Okay, and all of these together, they all impact the cost of care. Okay, because the better the income, the better the outcomes of the patients, less hospitalization, less complex procedures, less equipment, um, etc. This all has impact on cost of care. So if we kind of look at what areas are addressing this, I think one of the most common, and it's been around for a while, is diagnostic radiology. I think AI companies have been working on this for over a decade. I've also worked in one of these companies, and these applications kind of are ranging today from detection of lung nodules in X-rays that was used in COVID very widely, and then all the brain indications like stroke and hemorrhage and other brain conditions, and spine fracture detection, cardiac conditions, and ultrasound. A very wide range.
Yeah,
And these,
and eye, the picture of the eye, I know that it's
right, the
very,
retina,
yeah,
but everything that's in radiology, because radiology has been around for a while, and therefore you have data. Okay, you have a lot of data that was collected, which makes it easier to do these developments. Um, and these detection models, or segmentation models, they have reached high accuracy numbers. I'm talking upper 90s, and they've become really mature and more generic today than in the past. Um, and they're still continuing to advance. And they're mostly used to improve kind of on the efficiency and shortage of staff as they do the initial triage, right, or prioritization of the cases as they come in. So they say this one is suspected for a pathology, so look at this first, maybe treat this first, and that's really effective, especially where time kind of is in the essence, like in stroke and brain conditions. So that is one place where it was promising and still is. And I think a second one I would look kind of as we have more and more medical data being made available, right? It wasn't done before, but today it's very clear to the medical institutions that this is important, and there's more and more data being made available. Then there's room for the big data kind of models, the predictive analytic models, because kind of a patient record is this mess of a varied mix of historical documents and test results and imaging scans and summaries and reports. Some are scanned documents in a variety of formats. And so for a physician to go into kind of a patient file and study it, this takes time. So models that can kind of tell the patient's story to a physician in a very clear way, concise way in one place is super valuable and costs and can reduce the time that it takes. And then on top of that, the predictive models can actually take all that rich information and try to see if there's indication for any future conditions based on this information. That you need to remember that most of the patients going into hospitals are patients with chronic conditions. They're returning patients. If you look at who comes into the hospital, most of the patients are returning, and that's very effective. Okay, and lastly, I think, and coming back to where my company is intuitive, it's robotic surgery. And robotic surgery has tremendous potential to utilize AI. Intuitive's Da Vinci system is a platform that generates a lot of data points. Okay, it's not only the 3D video, that's one, but you have a multitude of information coming out of the system, like robotic arm motion, events from tools, the endoscope, illumination, and many more. And all of this is synchronized, right? It's all a complete data set that's synchronized, and you can build a lot on it. But again, in surgery, I would still separate it into two major categories. One would be the offline applications, which you could use that data. And the second one would be the online real-time ones. And we'll see that
While
they're
surgery, you
very
mean?
different
Yeah.
during the surgery. And they're very different because, for instance, the offline is something that's already there. Like in Intuitive, all the systems are connected to a cloud backend. So they collect all this information and they send it back. It's, of course, the system information, it's not the patient information, but it's analyzed continuously for maintenance purposes. So there are machine learning algorithms that are constantly looking at this information, and they can detect problems even before they occur. And then they can prompt these maintenance activities, and which make it very efficient and keep the system's uptime, which is again very crucial. These are critical, expensive systems.
Hmm.
So that's one offline um, application. In addition, once you have video collected and synced with all that data, then it's possible to analyze it and extract some insights for the surgeon. And that could be the motion patterns, surgery stages, benchmarking with other kind of gold standards, comparisons. So all of that could be very powerful tools to teach and improve, okay, the surgeons. Those are done offline. Those are kind of disconnected from the patient. Um, but this is an addition to the other tools that Intuitive has for training surgeons, like learning portals and simulator systems. And this is kind of another layer or level of applications that can improve and shorten the kind of the learning curve of the surgeon and bring up much more experts in a shorter
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. So what we're
Yep.
talking about is like systems that the surgeon is using there. It's not like a pilot that is doing in the airplane. that it's not a co-pilot that they're doing
No.
everything. Is the surgeon is operating them during the surgery, and they can help him do it faster or better, or helping
So this has,
diagnose
yeah.
and de-risk the surgery.
So during the surgery, this is completely invisible, kind of. It's under the hood. There's nothing. The
Mm,
surgery is going on using the Da Vinci system as usual, but the information is collected, and then the insights come in later. So the
mm.
surgeons can use it to learn, improve, and teach.
I thought
Okay,
that
and kind of
during the
in a loop.
surgery you get some kind
No,
of
with these applications, you don't have anything during the surgery. And of course,
mm,
that's a much lower regulatory risk, which makes it faster and easier to develop.
yeah,
Okay. And that brings us to the actual kind of real time during surgery applications. So these are obviously much more impactful as they can help the surgeon during the procedure, but they also take much longer to develop and release. And we've discussed why.
yeah,
And I think one of the most important things that can be addressed here is actually the safety of the procedure, because one of the risks in surgery is, of course, to kind of you know create damage to delicate organs that you don't want to touch, like blood vessels or nerves or any tissue that you don't want to touch. And applications like an algorithm that creates this 3D model of the organ from a CT scan and segments the tumor and kind of acts like a map for the surgeon. So this is also something that's already being developed and is there. Um, and these applications, of course, they require much higher confidence in their accuracy and performance, and so they take a little more time to, not a little,
yeah.
a lot more time to get to the market, and we're not seeing that many of them there out there.
Yeah, I could just imagine like a Mobileye for a surgeon, and he gets too close a neurological path or something, he would get some kind of alert that that's too much. But on the other hand, these people are so it could be, I know, a millimeter for them, so they're so tense as is and very focused. So I don't know if it will
Yeah,
even
you'll be
help them.
amazed at how these surgeons perform, and they could be very super relaxed during a super complicated procedure. It's pretty amazing, and they really value the safety mechanisms are very valuable.
Yeah,
Um, but I think, what about the famous question about autonomous robotic surgery, right? It has
yeah,
to come up sometimes. Where's that robot that you roll in a patient? The robot
and
does the
he's doing
surgery,
everything.
and that's it,
Or
and
the
you
surgeon
push
is
it
like
out.
in another continent. He's just giving the
Yeah,
operation.
today we have remote, right? The surgeon in a Da Vinci system is sitting not even near the patient in the room, but not near the patient and operating, and it is not even sterile. But what about the robot actually performing the surgery without any human intervention? So I think that's still far away, quite very
Oh,
much far away, and not only because of the technical challenge to get there. I mean, we can have maybe some things that are attainable, but there are other barriers much beyond that. And I think we still need to go a few steps higher in compute technology, in neural network efficiency, and some regulatory barriers that today will not enable that, even if we are able to do it. And we'll get there one day.
what is the biggest barrier for that? I thought that they don't have, they're not good enough. So people are better at
No.
that right now.
So
But what is?
it's still too complicated to do with the computational power that we can have on the edge right now, and we're not even reaching those kind of accuracy or confidence levels with, and we're not even investing in that, because it's just not, even if we would have that, then there are a lot of issues that come up around this. Like, if the more that an automatic system performs something, comes up the question, and we might talk about it later, of ethics. I mean, who has the responsibility? Let's say that the robot misperformed. Who's responsible for that? Is that the company that developed it? Or we don't want that, right? But is it the surgeon, but he didn't do anything? So things get really problematic, and I think
Yeah,
the regulatory bodies are far away from. Let's start with approving something much more simple,
yeah.
and get there step by step. But it's very far away.
So you mentioned that the doctor, the surgeon itself, is not sitting in the surgery room. He
No,
he
is this
sits.
sitting in the surgery room? but not by the patient side. They're not on the patient. They're sitting at the side of the room in a
Hmm.
console with a 3D vision straight into the body, and they operate the robot
Oh.
with controllers and pedals, and they
Could
can.
they do it from another continent, just from
Um,
afar?
it's technically possible, but probably the even the smallest latency is considered a risk, so it's not done in practice.
Ooh,
Okay, but but you could bring another kind of doctor with a dual console, and one can teach the other, and residents can try out. Like they can take the controls, and then the expert can take it back, and they can go between rooms because they're not sterile, and they can just leave their hands off, and everything stays in its place. It doesn't drop. So we're not
yeah,
discussing the advantages of the Da Vinci system here, but it's it's
yeah.
quite an amazing system.
So how vast is the usage of robotics in surgery in general?
So how widely used is
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
So it's today, I think, with Da Vinci system that are being used since the early 2000s, there have been more than, I think, 13 million procedures done with the system. It's around
Wow.
2 million a year now. It's about close to over 8,000 systems in over 60 countries. It's very widely used.
And robotics in general, what is the percentage of surgery done with robotics?
It's still a relatively low percentage of. So first of all, you're looking at minimal invasive surgery, not open surgery. But
Yeah.
even in minimal invasive surgery, it's still a relatively low percentage of surgeries done by robotic surgery.
Oh,
There's
so
still a lot of
you
room
have
to
a
grow.
big market in front
Yeah,
of you.
there is still a big market.
So the question would be like, if this is the situation right now, how do you perceive the future? Do you think that in the future we would have less surgeon in each of the institutes, or you'd have more patients in the
No,
hospital?
I don't think we'll have less surgeons. I think we'll have more robotic surgeons than we do, but not less surgeons. Hopefully, more surgeons, because the robotic surgery enables kind of the surgeon to become an expert faster.
Mm,
So hopefully, there will be more experts, and yeah, they'll be able to treat more patients, but
yeah,
certainly not less surgeons.
yeah. And you think that AI in general would not reduce the number of doctors? It will
No,
just make
no,
their
not
lives
in a
much
very near,
easier.
yeah, not in a very near future. They would just make it, there would not be less doctors. There will just be less doctors that don't use AI. Right? That's what we
Yeah.
say.
So I just talked to one of my previous guests, and he said, okay, so I talked to him about research showing that AI doctors AI is more considered more empathic when they answer in a forum, in a medical forum, and the real doctors, the human ones, were less empathic. And he said, okay, they're more empathic, but when you have a stroke, nobody cares about it. You need a doctor. So that's what he said. So it
Yeah.
seems,
So yeah, we'll probably have some chatbots taking over some of the communication, and we can make them as empathic that as we want, but they'll still only do the kind of simple stuff.
yeah. So in general, when we're talking about imaging, it's much like more far away from your body. So you have the physician or your family doctor who sees you once in a while, and then you have the expert, and then you have some kind of test. It could be like a blood test result or an imaging. And when you go far and far from the patient, there is more AI and more like usage of computing in general. And you get closer to the patient, it seems, of course, the way that you treat a person is not only giving the medicine, I hope. So it's much harder for a
Yeah.
machine to do so.
Yeah. Certainly.
So you think that AI would be part of helping? Like it's the same for for medical and emotional health. We I talked to some people talking about being a therapist with AI. So maybe it will just help the current therapists and doctors, and it will not be instead of them.
Yeah. We always start with kind of the assistant type of applications because that's a way kind of the stepwise and get to a more kind of generic application. So probably in every area it will be the same.
Yeah.
very likely.
Yeah. And how do you overcome we talked about the challenge of the being biased, that you get only part of the data from a part of the population. How do you handle that from people from other countries, from
So
other
so you
origins?
have, yeah, you don't have a lot of ways to get around it. You just have to collect data from every region, be representative, analyze your data. If you don't have enough female, then you need females. If you don't have enough of this condition, then you need to collect more. You have to
Wow.
go the hard way.
It looks like most of your
You don't have
like
shortcuts.
yeah, it's very hard just imagining that many of these institutes, when I went and worked with medical startups, I saw that many of these institutes are very old fashioned in the way that they work. They have a very old fashioned databases. If they have, it's
Right?
many
Sometimes,
of the work is manually
mhm.
done. So it's really hard to
Or in
manage.
scanned documents, not even in electronic records. Yeah, it's very hard. That's part of the complexity. But it's
Yeah.
getting better. They understand now that they can make a lot of revenue from
Oh,
this data,
that's a good
and
reason.
that's pushing them to make it more available. And today, I have a few hospitals in Israel which have a much better system. They're offering their data. They're offering annotation. Some of them are going that way.
So let's say that there is a big hospital. They understand that they get paid for the data. Of course, it's encrypted. You don't provide any personal data on your patients, of course, and that's why they're making more efforts to do it better for these AI institutes. That's what you're.
Yeah, the revenue is driving that. Yeah, but there's still kind of these ethical concerns, right? Like, do you have? It's not only in medical, but do you have the right to use someone's its personal information still? So it's disconnected. But who has the ownership on the
Right.
data? So does the patient own the data? Does the hospital, the surgeon? So usually the institute takes ownership of the data, but it's still kind of some
Yeah.
gray areas there, which are not
Yeah, it makes
completely
sense.
clear.
The fact that they hold it doesn't mean it's theirs, of course, but it makes sense that that's a way for them to make money. So,
Yeah,
uh,
and remember that we're also advancing healthcare. Okay, it's not really that we just it's not all for just revenue, and a hospital does not specifically in Israel does not come to make a profit.
of
Their
course,
revenues will help
yeah,
improve the hospital and
yeah, of
provide
course,
better care.
it's a good reason, but I'm sure that they're making an effort not to reveal any private information of their patients. So
Completely,
it's another
completely.
part of the process, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and also you as a company have to you signed these what they call BAA agreements, data agreements that you have to protect that data. You can't share it. You have to get consent to share it. You have to kind of take all the measures to protect it, verify that you don't receive any private information. It's not enough that you think you're not receiving, you have to check it. And then there's a lot around it.
Yeah. So when do you think AI will reduce healthcare costs? When do you think
So
that would happen?
so I think it's kind of already happening, okay, at some level because these are the first applications that we're seeing, right? Those that can improve the workflows, reduce some time, prioritize, maybe save a few kind of errors or adverse events. So that's already there, but it still kind of doesn't seem. I mean, have you really seen an explosion of this? Have you really heard of this great revolution or something that's completely changed in the healthcare system?
Not in healthcare.
Not in healthcare, and I think, and I agree. I think we're not there yet, and I think we should ask why is that? Why
Yeah.
hasn't it happened? So we talked about the challenges of developing and releasing these products, but we have quite a few products. I mean, if you looked at the number of applications that FDA cleared that are AI based, there are many of them. But most of these clearances, they go for the low risk indications. Okay, for example, if we take the detection of cranial bleeding, okay, in the brain during a stroke. So most companies settle for the indication to just triage that patient as suspected for hemorrhage or not. Okay, which is helpful. But actually, the algorithms under the hood they do much more. So in order to reach that conclusion, they would have to segment the hemorrhage. They probably can display it in 3D. They can calculate the volume. They can do a lot of things, but that's not given to the physician because that has a much higher regulatory barrier.
Mm.
And they went for the low risk. And then sometimes these algorithms are not meeting the expectations of the physicians, saying, hey, but we're trying to calculate the volume here. Why are you not giving me the volume? That would be
Yeah.
helpful. And and on top of that, sometimes these algorithms are also requiring the staff to change their workflows. Okay, they now have to do something different, which sometimes is kind of is distractive. Some cases, these AI prompts, these bounding boxes or sounds are, with a certain percent of false alarms, they could be pretty distracting. And so having a good performing algorithm in the upper 90s accuracy doesn't, promise that there'll be satisfaction and adoption by the medical staff. That still needs a lot more than just that.
Yeah, I think that in most cases that you have a user which is a that he's a real expert, that he has experience for years and years, and it's very complicated type of information that he's handling. I see it the same like when I work with finance experts. They really want to know the information exactly. How did the algorithm decided that that's the answer? What does that mean? If you're talking about the volume of the hemorrhage, for example, they want to know what is like this is 80%, 83. Why did he say that? In order to give really first trust, and more than that, let's say they do trust it, they want to understand what the implication for the treatment itself. And then it's not enough information, and sometimes they are more reluctant to use it because of that.
Because most of the times they also have to verify it. That's another way to kind of reduce the risk is ask the physician to verify the results of the AI algorithm. And then they say, now I have to look, I really have to think because the AI said that this has an indication, but I'm not seeing it. So I have to double check it and double check it. And that sometimes makes it even more time consuming than
Right,
it was.
right,
It may be
right.
more accurate, but for the physician, it becomes difficult because they don't
Yeah,
want, to miss something. And sometimes the AI got it wrong. But there's going
yeah.
over it again and
Like
again, and
any
there's
other.
nothing there.
Yeah, I think that it's first being a doctor is very hard work, especially if like you need to work fast with lots of people, and people are not always, especially when they don't feel well, they're not hard, they're not easy to handle, and you need to do so much more than just seeing a person, writing the diagnosis, and giving a treatment. You need to do much more than that, and AI and any medical system need to take into consideration that these people need to work in a certain situation. If it's like if we're talking about stroke, it's a very extreme situation because people like a person could die in a minute or so. But in general, when they need to work in these kinds of situation, the information needs to be given within the context of what the doctor is looking
Yeah.
for.
At the
Uh,
right time and not too much of it. Yeah. And try to fit yourself into the workflow that already exists and not be,
yeah. Yeah,
disruptive.
and it's more than that. I think that I don't know how much of it it's considered to be related to that, but a person who went through at least like 15 years more or less of studying, more or less, in order to get to this stage, right, to be a surgeon, and now there is this machine that could be very smart and help him. He wants to know that he's done this effort, and yeah, he wants to trust himself. He doesn't want all the machines helping them. Only in the situation, for example, you mentioned like in surgery that I don't need to hold my hand without moving, which is, yeah, it's important for a surgeon, but if somebody could help me with it, it makes sense that it will so. But maybe diagnosis, very complex situation, they say, okay, I learned 15 years and more in order to do so. So I wouldn't let go of this capability for a machine.
Yeah. But you also see different attitudes. I mean, the young doctors, they already grew up with these products, with everything going on. They're mostly involved in these type of studies and research, and they're much more acceptive of this. And they work together. The kind of the more expert Veteran doctors sometimes have a harder time accepting, but of course, not to generalize, there are both on both sides different
Yeah.
people, but
Yeah.
yeah, in the general case.
Yeah. We didn't talk about one of the aspects of AI that could work is like personalization. How far are we from AI helping with personalized medicine treatment and
So
individual patient getting different type of
yeah, so I
treatment?
think when I look at I'll talk about surgery, and when I look at personalization in surgery, so I think of how unique is every surgery. So it comes out of the unique anatomy of any individual. I mean, that really impacts the surgical procedure, the organ structure, the fat levels, the location and the size of the tumors, the location of the blood vessels. This all changes in every individual. It could be very different. And these factors make every surgery a unique challenge. Okay. And now, so before we have AI used to actually perform the surgical procedures, they can really help increase the precision, accuracy, and safety. Okay. So we talked about these applications that create 3D models, kind of like maps. But you could also think of segmentation, kind of an indication of the different tissues that the surgeon is viewing. If you can have the blood vessels and nerves indicated on the video, that's a super valuable application because it can really safeguard the physician. But there are applications that are already existing, like intuitive, um, has what's called the ION system. It's a robotic guided bronchoscopy system, which is used to take biopsies from the lung. And what it does, it creates this 3D map of the patient's lungs, and the lungs really look like a very kind of a complicated pathway. And the physician can actually plan the route exactly how they want to get to that suspected area where they want to take the biopsy. And then as they go in, right, they navigate with the robotic system and they see the 3D model and the video, and they really have kind of this map guiding them through the path that they selected, which of course keeps them kind of giving them those safety rail guards. And that's very specific to that patient because everyone's lungs are very different. Okay, it's all very personalized. If they would just have gone through a default path, they'd probably have a very lower success rate.
That do they get information that they cannot see with the camera? So when I go, let's say I'm a doctor, insert the camera. Would I see the same information as blood vessels and nerves that you give me in the 3D imaging,
So in the
or
3D, you
not?
only see the pathway of the lung, the airways. Okay, but you also don't have that. If you just go in with a camera, all you see is what's ahead of you. You see a
Mm,
tube and you see maybe a bisection and
yeah,
but a bifurcation, but where how do you know where to go? Here you see the whole
yeah,
map, you see where you are. Same as
yeah,
driving on the road and not knowing where to go.
yeah. Bless you.
That's you.
So what we're saying is that it's a way for the doctor to de-risk the surgery. That's one,
Yeah.
and be more efficient, and maybe in some cases maybe even not make mistakes and make maybe faster. I'm not sure if they do it faster because of the map. Do you think they do it faster?
Usually the robotic surgeries are not in generally faster than but they are safer and they lead to less hospitalization and less adverse events, etc.
I see. Okay. So do you think that it's more accurate too?
Yeah, it's more accurate. And one really important thing is that it doesn't create the same fatigue on the
Mm.
physician because the physician is not standing over the patient holding tools in their hands,
Oh,
needing to keep them up all the time, and they need more assistance. And they're looking at a 2D screen, which is very different from having a 3D screen, complete control of not two hands, but actually three. You can switch between them. And it and then they can do more procedures. They don't
oh,
get fatigued. So as I said, they can
yeah.
even switch between rooms and go
Or
back
switch between surgeons.
or suite between surgeons or residents or whatever. So that's a
Yeah.
very big
And
advantage.
are there surgeries that you have several surgeons doing the procedure?
You do,
Like
but only
several.
one can take control. So you can have two. sitting, but one can take control, the other one looks, and then they
No, I meant
switch.
like two devices, like you have four, like
No,
playing the piano with four
no,
hands.
you have four hands which you can control yourself.
Yeah,
So you
yeah. But
sometimes have an assist that holds a manual one as well.
and who is the person that is really next to the
So that's
patient?
the first assist, and that's
Mm.
a young doctor or a nurse that
Mm.
that replaces the tools and does
Oh,
everything that kind of needs to be done near the patient, but not the
oh,
physician, not the surgeon. Surgeon doesn't go there.
I see. And there are like less people in the surgery
There are a
room
little bit
because of
less
that.
people. There could be less people in the room. Yeah,
I see. So
not
that's a good thing.
considerably, but a little bit less. Yeah.
I see. I see. So, what do you think is the biggest barrier today for AI to get like help more to humanity within the medical
Yeah.
domain?
So I call it kind of. I think we're not in the AI revolution yet in medical, but we are in the data revolution. Okay. So what we really need in order to get to that next level is to really have this data revolution happen, which means to have the amount of data available the same way as we do for kind of other other areas, and for that we need the institutions to make things available, make them more available for the academia. We need to have data from all over the world, like you have in the internet. So once we're over that revolution, then we'll see the jump in the performance and the things we can do, together with the compute, which is always advancing, but eventually you'll have to do a lot in real time, and you'll need that compute to be there. And of course, the regulatory bodies which have to adapt and be be willing to make those the few more steps forward, and they'll need confidence to have that. Then that's why it's going to go slow.
I see. Okay, so let's say I'm considering like I have a great idea for a AI startup. What would be the first tip that you or a few tips that you could give me if I want to go to that direction?
So first of all, have a lot of patience. Don't expect to have things happen fast. Know the things that you need, and do your learning up ahead. Know everything you need to know about regulatory quality. You know all the basics, and understand that it's different. And then start by making some connection with clinical experts and institutions. It usually comes from there. Without that kind of partnership, it's usually very hard um, to advance. It's usually the way to go, especially at the beginning. Partner with one institution, maybe two, which are local, which are close, and get that physician or two that work with you, and that's usually a good plan.
Yeah, I see. I'm happy that you mentioned patients first because I think that most entrepreneur they have this timeline in their mind, which is not resonating with the timeline that is needed for a medical device or a software. It doesn't matter. That is, it demands lots of time and money and patience and
Yeah,
going through barriers
yeah.
and
Learn from others. There are so many others that did it, that already did it, and they can tell their story. You have to come in and learn if you don't have the experience in this
yeah.
domain, or at least get people that do.
Yeah. So how far do you think we are like getting to a hospital and getting the help of an AI machine to get my diagnosis
So,
faster or
so as I
treatment
said,
better?
we have products already there. Radiology diagnostics is being used, maybe not widely enough as we would
Yeah.
have wanted, but it's there. We have different applications that are already assisting in different types of procedures. So most likely you will encounter it, but it won't be that obvious yet. Be kind of, or maybe it will be some post processing that you're not even aware of,
Yeah.
but it's already there. And in the future, it will be much more evident and during the procedure itself with much more
Yeah.
value.
Yeah, I think that right now most people who would need any kind of a diagnosis, which is not like very simple, would take time, especially if they need someone who is very a big expert with lots of experience managing their test results, or if they have a complex situation, it will always take time, and it will. if like even in the future, let's say like even 10 years from now, I don't think that you will get to a place that a machine will do everything.
No,
That you will say, okay, that's my test results, that's my blood, that's my scans, not tell you what I have.
no, and I
Eh,
think we've detailed why all
yeah,
during this call. So set the
I
expectations.
there is another reason other than you mentioned who is responsible. I think that the person wants to know that somebody is responsible for him. It doesn't matter, like it's like a feeling that somebody cares, although you don't always get that feeling when you go to a doctor. Like there is a person that
Yeah,
I could trust who would tell me
and
what's
that
going
and that
on
will
with me.
have to be worked out. Once we get there, that will have to be worked out. So someone will have to be the responsible person. Most likely, it will go towards the physicians in some way, and they will require for that different things from the companies. That makes it complex, yeah.
Yeah, it
But
is
don't forget,
complex.
we've talked a lot about the challenges. Don't forget about the amazing, I mean, satisfaction that you have working in the medical domain. I mean, when you go in and see your product being used inside a procedure room in an OR and actually helping, and some physician they'll be, "Dear, this was really helpful." That's an amazing, amazing feeling. It's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, and I hope that the patients will feel it in a way too, because if it takes less time, if it's more accurate, if they feel that they get the best treatment, if they feel that maybe even the doctor has more time to just see them
Yeah.
instead of like all the time clicking on the
Yeah. So,
handwriting
so
on
our
the.
digital products are right now taking time, reducing the time needed for analyzing some of the procedures, working on the videos. So that gives the physician more time. This is
Yeah.
already there.
Yeah, you mentioned this AI going through all my medical records and then telling the doctor from the beginning, this is the test result, that's what's going on, this is
Yeah,
what
just
the.
telling the story in an organized way,
Yeah,
even that is a challenge. And there are
yeah.
some companies that are working on that in that direction.
Yeah. When I go to the doctor, I always see there, I go and see the screens. I want to see how it looks. And I say, okay, these are screens maybe in the 80s, I would give them 90s. And it's like, how do they work with these kinds of systems? They always need to go from one window to the other, to the other, to other systems. It's divided because of privacy. And this is what he got there.
Yeah, and this is a
And
private institution. It didn't come into your file. You need to bring it maybe. Yeah,
yeah, it's very complicated to do so. So we hope that that would be at least very soon for a doctor to know what's going on and not spend like half of the 10 minutes that you already have and like watching the screener to see what's going on and not looking at the patient. So that would be very that's my wish, I would say, at least that. So thank you very for your time. Tell me, where could people hear more about your work, about Intuitive, and contact you?
so we have look at the Intuitive Israel's LinkedIn page, follow our posts, um, and also kind of from time to time we have a meetup here in our offices in Tel Aviv. So maybe look for those. Probably the best way to meet us. Contact our people through LinkedIn.
Sure, sure. So thank you, Ray, for the talk. It's been
Thank you.
very
It was a
insightful and
pleasure.
interesting to me too. And I hope that we'll meet like in a fun way. I don't want to meet any of your devices in any way. Just
Yeah, that's why we always say, I hope we never meet you.
for sure. And to all of you change makers out there, thank you for joining us. And if you found this episode valuable, please share it. And I see some people saying thank you, and Irina saying thank you. So thank you all for listening. And you're so invited to our next session. I hope it will be soon. See you all. Bye bye.
Bye bye.